So this is part 3 of the second series called Barbados is Imaginary. Now, what I probably should have called this was Participate in the Imaginary, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're partaking and participating in our imaginary acts that Neville says are real, they're factual, and that's what we start. And, when he told his students to climb the ladder, what he was saying was, if you listen to the verbiage very carefully, he says, take your imaginary hand, your imaginary right hand, very specific, and place it on the imaginary ladder. Take your imaginary left foot and place it on the ladder. And you do the imaginal activity of climbing it. And you partake in this imaginary act. And then this imaginary act becomes a fact in the world. And so we start from the premise that it's all imaginary, and we partake in the imaginary. And so that the thing that we want, the conception that you want, the money that you want, the congratulatory handshake, the promotion, the hearing of the good news, the forgiveness, the freedom, all of it is imaginary. It's within you. It's something that you are allowed to partake in, or you're allowed to have. Regardless of whether if you take your ego out of it, you start wondering if you're deserving of it, just take yourself out of that. Take that out of it. Don't bring what's outside inside. Don't mix the ingredients. Keep it all imaginary. Keep it all imaginary. And you'll see that your freedom is imaginary. You don't have to feel deserving of it. It's just imaginary. You're allowed to have whatever you want and partake in the imaginary. You're allowed to participate in this world that is made of all imagination, which is inside of you. And when you see it as all imagination, you won't feel that something's off limits. There's no off limits here in this world. And so I remember when I went to go test this out, when I got inspired by the ladder experiment years ago. And I was in Las Vegas at the time, and I wanted to participate in an imaginal act of winning in the roulette table on a specific number. I didn't really care about the amount. I wanted to specifically win on a specific number. And so what I did was I went within myself, and I made a duplicate, an imaginary duplicate of what I wanted to do in the flesh. I found its a duplicate. Neville said it like this. He said, what you can do in the flesh, you can duplicate in fancy, which is the same way of saying there's an imaginary duplicate of what you want to do or what you want to have. And so what I did was I made the MGM Grand imaginary. I placed my imaginary right hand. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant my imaginary left hand on the imaginary leather pad on the imaginary roulette table. And I saw the imaginary dealer place the imaginary ball, and then he spun it, and it landed on the imaginary number 23. And I saw his hand, his imaginary hand, place the imaginary glass topper on top of the number 23 on top of the imaginary table. And I won in imagination. My winning was imaginary. And I participated in this imaginal act. I made it real by participating in it. And I made myself there imaginary. It was all imaginary. And I didn't say to myself, well, money was hard to get, or that I usually lose at these things, or that I'll try my hardest to believe that it's real. I didn't do any of that. I just partook in the imaginary act. That's all I did. I didn't question my worthiness. I didn't wonder if it was real or not. I simply made myself imaginary, and I partook in the imaginary. And so when Neville wanted to leave the army, he went within himself and he slept next to his imaginary wife on their imaginary separate beds. As at the time, that's what they did. And he said he was like making breakfast, his imaginary breakfast. It was all imaginary. He just simply partook. He took his imaginary body and started partaking in the imaginal activities within himself, regardless of the outside. And that is what we do. We simply partake in it. That's the best way of putting it. When Abdullah told him to go to Barbados, you want to go to Barbados, he said, see the imaginary sand. Put your imaginary feet in the imaginary sand. See the palm trees, the imaginary palm trees. You start seeing imagination. You start partaking in imagination. You start having imagination. You start to actually have it, and that you will. And what they believed is that what you see is what you have in imagination. And so you don't have to question it. It's something you partake in. You partake in the having. You partake in the feast, which is to actually experience your imaginal activity. You don't wonder, you don't feel unworthy of the ladder. The ladder just appears in front of you. I didn't feel unworthy of the casino. The casino is just there. Its imaginary duplicate is within me. And so if I want something, it doesn't really matter what it is. If I want it, I make an imaginary duplicate of it, and I have it in imagination. I partake in that. It really doesn't matter what it is. If you want to wear a certain brand of clothing, just find its imaginary duplicate, make it in imagination, and wear it. If you want to be a new state of mind, be it. You can find its imaginary duplicate within you. And you don't have to feel that it has to, first something has to happen on the outside first in order to have it. You first do it within oneself. You don't have to find a ladder on the outside. You just climb it within you. You don't have to find the money on the outside. You just start having it within you. And so you and the thing that you want are not far away from each other. It's within you. And so even though it might feel far away, it isn't. That's an illusion. So if you want something in this world, you don't feel that it's far away from you. You place it in your hands. You feel it. You hold it. You hear it. You partake in it. You make Barbados imaginary. If you want to be in Barbados, you want to physically be somewhere, make it imaginary. You partake in that. And I like the word partake because it's you're actually participating the same way you would do in the flesh here. You mimic it in spirit. You mimic it in imagination. That is what we're doing. That's the premise of all of this in regards to practicing the law. Now the promise is a bit different. The promise is an awakening that happens within the individual, but we start from repentance, and repentance is a radical change of mind. And so if I see something physically, if my senses are interpreting something physical, but I want to be somewhere different, I don't have to wait. I radically change my attitude. And you'll see that it doesn't matter what the appearances have shown or what they're showing. You start from the premise that it's imaginary. And so if you feel that you've been in bondage in something for a long time, you don't have to wait to be freed. You start freeing yourself. It's a self-freedom, a self-pardoning. You pardon yourself. It's all imaginary. And so you never have to feel unworthy for anything ever again. It's something you can let go of. Start from the premise that it's imaginary and partake in the imaginary. Even yourself. You make yourself imaginary. Neville was in the army. Yes, his physical body was there. Yes, he was physically there, but he made himself imaginary. He believed that he was the one who was imaginary instead of believing the one that he was physical. And he partook, and he made breakfast, and he spoke imaginary words with his imaginary wife. But to him, it wasn't just imaginary, because he made himself imaginary. It became real. So you might hear that first and say, well, there's an imaginary duplicate of what you want. It might sound silly. You might not see the point, but if you test it out, really try to see if it's true or not. Is there an imaginary duplicate of the thing that I want? Maybe I lost something in the world. Can I find it back in my imaginary hand? Can I take my imaginary right hand and place that item that I lost? So say that I want something. Can I stop wanting it and partake in the having of it? It's something you can practice daily. And you don't do anything other than what you would do in the flesh. So if you were to hear good news in the flesh, and that would be the implication of it being you being successful in some area in your life, that's all you do in the imagination. You just hear it. You just listen. That's all you do. You don't do anything more. If you do anything more, then you're trying to perfect the thought. You're trying to make everything perfect, and it's not really about making it perfect. It's simply hearing it or seeing it or holding it or feeling it or partaking in it. That's all you're doing. You're just simply mimicking what you do in the flesh. You're just mimicking that in the spirit. And you're making it feel natural because the flesh feels natural to us. So then you mimic the flesh and the spirit. And that's how these two become one. And then that's what manifests is when it becomes natural. And so you don't, maybe at first it might feel uncomfortable to have a new mental clothing, but you must see that if you want to change your mental outfit, or if you want to change your mental attitude, it's because you have outgrown the mental outfit you're wearing right now. It's too tight now. The clothing doesn't fit. The mental clothing is too tight. You've outgrown it. It's time to put on a new outfit. So if you have the urge within you to change, but you're struggling to change, then you're not seeing that you're holding yourself back. Because it's you who wants to change. It's you who's telling yourself that it's time to put on a different outfit, but you're resisting it. So resistance is self-resistance. It's self-resisting the acceptance of a new state within you, a new idea that you want to believe about yourself. But remember, it's imaginary. You don't have to wait upon the senses to do anything. You don't have to wait for the outside to change, for the imaginary to change. So Neville didn't see Barbados physically. No, he didn't. But he saw it in imagination. He brought what was there. So we take what's so far removed from us and we bring it to our present moment right now. We take what's over there and we make it here. We take what we want and we make it that we have it. So what we want becomes fulfilled. That is what we're doing. I'm going to say that again. We take what is there and we make it here. So Barbados is over there. It's far away from me, but I make it here right now. And so I see palm trees. If I was there, I would see palm trees. And so I make Barbados imaginary, and that's why I labeled it that. But really, it's about partaking in the imaginary. He partook in this world of imagination where there's a duplicate of what he wants. He wanted to be in Barbados. And so you'll see that everything has a duplicate. Even the people within your world have their duplicate within you. So when you dream, you'll see people that, in your life that are in your dreams. There's an imaginary duplicate of them, and there's an imaginary duplicate of you. But start partaking in this world. Start having things in this world. Caesar's coin is in this world. It was made from this world. So you don't have to, and this world is infinite. So don't feel like you're taking something from it. It's infinite. It's just you. It's just here to partake. There's an infinite amount of ladders. There's an infinite amount of yous in it. There's an infinite amount. So don't feel that you're depleting anything. Don't feel that. Don't feel that at all. Don't feel that you are depleting anything. Don't feel that you're taking too much, is what I'm saying, within yourself. If you want something within yourself, have it. And if you want more of it, have it. Keep fulfilling. And when you see that it's all imaginary, that's the action that we take, is we make what's there here. That is the action that Abdullah told Neville. Then you don't have to. Now, Abdullah didn't tell him, well, you're going to have to find a way to get a ticket, and maybe you can go pick up a job to make the money. He didn't say anything like that. He told him to make Barbados imaginary. Make it there. Bring it here now. And Neville thought that was a little bit crazy, but he did it. He tried it. That's all I'm saying. Just try it. I tried it with the casino. Thought it was a fun idea. And make it fun. Just try it. Make everything imaginary, what you want, and partake in it. Exactly what I did. And you'll be surprised how it comes about. You'll be nudged. Somebody will bring you. Somebody will take you by the hand if they have to. But it will be fulfilled because you fulfilled it within yourself. You partook in something imaginary. Now you have to partake it in the flesh, because these two are not separate but one. So you don't ask how it's going to be done. You partake in it being done, in the doneness, if you will. You don't ask when. You take when and you make it now. You take the how and you experience it. So you don't have to ask the how anymore. That's what we do. That is hitting your mark. So you hit the mark in imagination. The mark is imaginary. That's what you hit. And so you don't wait to be something. You don't wait for others to change. You don't need them to. You don't need a helper on the outside. You don't need any helper to do this. You don't need anyone on the outside to see something, be different, or have some type of awakening or a different interest. You don't need to do that. You just simply start partaking in the imaginary. You start now. You don't keep waiting. You don't wait for the world to change for you to change. You don't need it to. Once you see you don't need it to, then you can be freed from that idea. That you don't need the senses to be different. You can just start being different now. And then you'll see that you've freed yourself from the senses in that regard. And so your imagination becomes freed from the senses, freed from having to obey them. And so Neville, what Abdullah really taught him was to be freed from the senses. As that your senses are telling you that you don't have the money, that you can't do it, you can't go to Barbados. Well, be there. Your senses are telling you that you can't have the forgiveness that you want, the freedom that you want, the worthiness that you want. Well, then have it. Your senses are telling you can't have this be fulfilled, that you can't have this, that, and the other. Well, then have it. Make it imaginary. Make yourself imaginary. Partake in it. And that's what we do. And so that's the part 3. Now, if this is still unclear to you, I do offer one-on-ones. If you wanted to do that, you can contact me in the email description. There'll be an automated message, but I try to make this clear, as clear as I can. And I know that sometimes the verbiage can be a little bit confusing, but if you slow it down and if you actually practice it, you'll see what I'm saying. And so when you go into meditation tonight, practice making things imaginary. Even if it doesn't make sense, just try it. And you'll see what I mean. Take your imaginary body and partake in the imaginal acts. Have the thing that you want. And you'll see that you do. And when then you start living your life from that area, you no longer wait for senses. You no longer respond to them or react to them the same way. And so also, if you want to read it, I have it on Reddit. Just go to the description as well. Just click on the Reddit link, and you'll see I'm about to write another part. I'm about to write part 5 soon. I'm going to make part 4 videos soon. But I put some Neville quotes in the write-up that I didn't say here. So if you want to read those, I think they're very important reads. I think that they add to this. And like, for example, right here it says, don't ignore it. Put something in its place and become self-persuaded that the imaginal act is real, that it's factual. So that's what we're doing. And so we see that the imaginary and the flesh are not two, but one.